no such thing as a kid who doesn't like to read. It's just a kid who hasn't found the right book. And I think that the digital services are much better at customizing. And that's what we really have to work on to make sure kids have books they want to read, that they choose to read.
All right, well, let's talk about that. Tell me a little, again, I'm talking to you as a dad now.
Yeah.
Right? And folks are listening. What are some of the digital services that I should be looking into? How does it work? Should it be an app that I tell my son to add to his phone? Like, what are some of the things that I should be looking into?
Well, I'm a big believer still that kids should read print books, physical books, because I think there's a lot to that. Okay. What I mean about the digital services as a comparison is just that we're competing with digital programs and digital products. And so they're sort of eating our lunch in terms of the digital ability to get the right program, the right product to the kids. So I'm just saying for physical books, we have to work on doing that just as well. And so how do you do that? Like, how do you give physical book choices to kids, and how do they learn how to choose? So my belief and my work through my entire career we have to bring the teacher and the family, the caregiver, and the child all together at the same time. And because if we're sort of peeling one or the other off, it's not going to work. And so, teachers are big helpers. They know what kids can read. They know what kids like. They have a sense of their reading proficiency. Because the other problem is if you give a kid a book that's much too hard for them or much too easy for them, that's not a match either. And so it's easy to sort of throw that away. So I think we have to be much more mindful and respectful of the child, really, about what book is going to be right for them, and not just show up and say, hey, be a reader. That's not fair. It's not fair to a kid. So that's what we're working on. Programming that starts in the classroom, enables kids to choose books that they like, books that are interesting, and supports their curriculum. Because, there's a lot of discussion about what's the best way to teach kids reading. I don't care. Whatever works, science of reading or whatever system works is great by me. But once they learn how to read, they have to practice their reading with books that motivate them to read.
Okay. So let's just say, all right, so maybe not necessarily the digital. You're more on the old school side of things. It's like, let's put that book in your hand. And I'm more that way too, because I like to highlight. I like, what do you call it? Rabbit ear, the bottom where I left off, bookmark and all that kind of stuff. So I get it. That's how I came up. So maybe not necessarily the digital side of things. I guess the question then would be, because you mentioned the reading level, like maybe is it too easy? Is it too hard? Do you recommend maybe educators look at a Lexile score, see where students are at reading wise, and then maybe physically recommend, here's a set of books that you might be interested in, or maybe put it in, like, how do you suggest that so that we can make sure that they're reading at the right level that's challenging, still it's stimulating their interest and those kind of things?
Yeah, I think choice is the top for me. So if the kids choose the book, they're interested in it. Graphic novels are all the rage now in middle school, for older kids, Dog Man, Captain Underpants, all kinds of things. And if a kid's interested in that, and maybe they can't read every vocabulary word, but they get it through the pictures, like, that's great. Every year at Halloween for like 30, 20 years, I give out books instead of candy. And we have hundreds and hundreds of kids come every year. I live in Montclair, New Jersey. They come from Newark. They come from all over, and they line up. It's like a crazy festival every Halloween. And so the kids line up, and, I get very obsessive about, having a wide range of books for kids to choose from. But, the kids really wants that Barbie book, or really wants that, picture book. And the parents are like, tell the book lady, which is, my name.
They call you the book lady?
Yeah, they call me the book lady. Tell the book lady that you read at a higher grade level. I'm like, oh, please, stop. Let the kid choose the book that they are going to be motivated to read, that they can take home, that they can put on their shelf, that they can be proud of. It's not a competition, and you're not impressing me. So I think choice and interest, and, what we do not have in the publishing industry is enough nonfiction, particularly, for all kinds of readers, but, historically for boys. We need a lot of nonfiction. And we have a series that we created called Who Would Win, which are all over the schools. You probably have them in your own school. And they pit, they are competitions between a great white whale, great white shark, and a hammerhead shark. And there's facts in there, and the kids learn to make their decisions. And so very highly illustrated. So nonfiction is a very important way for kids to get acclimated to books and things that they're interested in. So we just have to focus on let the kids pick. I mean, you yourself, you don't want to read a book that someone's forcing you to read.
Okay.
You're not interested in. So why should kids be different? So I say, let's respect the choice. And we know from so much data, the Scholastic Kids and Family Reading Report and all this other data, that when kids choose, those are the books they read.
Okay. All right. So fair enough. I'm not a ELA teacher, so this is good stuff.
Well, I could tell you when my son was 12, we couldn't get him to read either. So we just kept, he fishes, he's a fly fisherman. And so we just kept finding books. There was a great book called Joe and Me about a fly fisherman. And we just put it on, he went in there and then he started to build it back up. So anyway.
So it's okay. So I like the idea of choice. So say, let the kids choose what they want. However, I would assume that part of our job would be to put those books in front of them. Yes. Maybe carefully curating a selection, different genres, different characters, whatever, like you said, nonfiction, fiction, those kind of things, putting that in front of them. So do you recommend at all levels, K-12, early childhood, whatever, that we have an area where there's books outside of just the school library?
Yes, and yes. I mean, what we're doing right now is we're launching a program called the United States of Readers, which is essentially those flyers, you got as a kid. And they're filled with books that are, as you say, curated by grade, by age, they look like this. And they're the best books. And of course, you need expert editorial curation in order for books to make sense to kids. And 5 times a year, every kid chooses 2 books. There's no prices on these flyers. And then it's done in the classroom. Every single child participates equally, and every single kid in the school participates equally. So we avoid some of those awful feelings with some of these programs where, some kids can't participate, and that just creates yet another negative drag on reading. So yeah, we need curation. We need, fun. Anybody who's bringing together a collection for people to choose, it's got to be the fun new stuff and the old classics and all kinds of genre, to your point, and reading levels, and without price in the mix and with everybody included, completely inclusive, then you have a wonderful experience. And the teachers feel good because, you're a principal. I mean, teachers use a lot of their own household money to buy books for their kids, to play, for supplies for their classroom, which is like ridiculous. So this takes the pressure off the teachers. They also get 25 books for their classroom library in this program. And, it's morale boosting for teachers who, need morale boosting right now because there's a lot of pressure on these teachers. And in the schools that we're thinking about, we're thinking about 10 million kids in this country who, live in book deserts, really. They don't have access to books. And that's the issue. The kids who have more affluence, who have more access, they'll be okay. They might not be interesting people to talk to, but they'll be okay because they'll have other supports in their life.
Yeah.
But if you can't read and you're in a very low supported community, you're screwed, frankly. And that's not okay.
So it's called say it one more time.
Yeah, the United States of Readers.
Okay. United States. Is that available for just North America?
No,
is it international?
It's not international yet. Our goal is to reach, we did a pilot, 50,000 kids in every single state in the country, because that's the other thing that we're determined is to have a transcendent thing where we're not caught up in political, debate over kids. Kids end up being collateral damage over this. So there's books for all. There's opportunities for families, to support whatever their kids want. We would never force a book on anybody. The books are all well vetted, well curated. And so it's all kids and we're rolling. Our goal is 10 million kids. We've been named a big bet for America by the Rockefeller Foundation. And I think what I'm seeing now, because I've been in the trenches on this work a long time, I think we're seeing people are fed up. The reading proficiency scores are declining. They've been declining for decades. I have an MBA and a publishing experience for decades. But when I started doing this work and talking to educators, even like yourself, I had imposter syndrome. So I'm like, who am I? I'm not an educator. My mom was a teacher, but, I never been in the classroom. So I went back to grad school to get a master's of education because even though that's not the same as actually being in a classroom, I wanted to surround myself with educators. And so I did that. My husband's like, what are you doing? And so I really started to understand the challenges, that are out there. But we're seeing a shift. I think people are fed up with the declines. People with resources are willing to listen to a new approach. And that's what we're trying to bring forward.
All right. Well, folks, links in the show notes. Educators out there, if you're looking for this resource, make sure you look at those links there and see if this is something that you, is there like a qualification, eligibility in order to be a part of this?
Well, we're raising money right now. So we're in Massachusetts. We got funding from the state. We got money from some nonprofits in Florida. So we're building Save the Children, which is a huge organization, I'm sure you know, working with us there to get 1 million kids the program in living in rural poverty in 14, mostly southern states where they are. And so they're going to raise money. It's a lot of private philanthropy. My goal is, like free and reduced lunch was a federally funded program because kids need to eat. That's not up for discussion. Similarly, they need to be able to read. And we're about collective action because there's a lot of people doing wonderful work out there, a lot of small organizations, nonprofits, literacy advocates, and so on. So I don't want to reinvent the wheel. I just want to give everybody the opportunity to scale, to help scale. So
okay, I like this. All right, like I said, links in the show notes, folks. So that way, if you want to learn more or support in any kind of way that you can help this sounds like a really good project that you're working on. So I'm glad that you're doing this.
Yeah, it's inspiring at this stage of the game, and we have so much experience. So it's thrilling, actually. And when the kids get the books, they're loving them, and we're hearing the reports, and we're all about data. I know data is really important, and so we're tracking and measuring, and it's wonderful to see. It's very thrilling, and the authors get involved. And anyway, sorry, I get carried away.
I didn't mean to cut you off, but I do love the passion, and again, I think that's amazing work that's being done. I want to switch back a little bit for a second because I'm still thinking about ways that teachers educators and parents can kind of spark that. Hey, books are great. You should take some time to do some reading outside of being forced.
Yeah,
we've kind of established that, like as far as the choice side of things. What are maybe some recommendations that you might have for like maybe even just down to helping students kind of decide on what genres they're into?
Yeah. Well, I think read alouds, there's no time in the classroom right now. So teachers are really strapped for time. But if there's a little bit of time to do a read aloud, a teacher reading in front of a class can really motivate kids to want that book. There's all kinds of author videos and so on we can share. I think they're underknown, not well known enough, and underutilized. But, having a good classroom library with a wide range of books in them, the kids can, explore and look at, of course, is a great idea because they're in class. I mean, they're in the class and the books are right there. So I think, also giving kids permission to start a book and not finish it. In my day, we always felt we had to finish a book. Like, why? So if you don't like it, put it down and pick up another one. Sharing books with friends, with other kids. I always love the coolest kid in the class strategy. There's that one kid that just leads everybody. So if you can co-opt that person and make them an ally, and kind of sharing or even doing read alouds. There's all kinds of tips and tricks you can do. I know you're all about practical, real things educators can do to move the needle and change equity and change things. And I say the same approach. There's real basic stuff that you can do, and getting kids books and being respectful of the child. So really listening and seeing the kid, if the kid's really into football, give them a football book and let them speak about it, I think.
So I think I heard this, but I want to make sure this is what I heard. It sounded like you said that it's okay for students not to finish a book.
Yes.
That just goes against everything that's not how I grew up. I think about accelerated reading programs and how you had to finish the books in order to get the test. And is that what I heard you say? Is like, it's okay to not finish the book.
I mean, if you're in a curricular book that you have to finish as part of a class assignment, that's one thing. But books are pleasure reading to motivate you to read. If you started and it's awful, how is making a kid finish that going to ever make them a reader? So I say, put it down as long as you pick up another book. As long as you're trying the next thing, find a book that you like that's going to motivate you to read.
I love this. It just kind of made me think about like all the times I've watched, like try to watch a show on like a Netflix or somewhere, and I get 2 episodes in, I'm like, man, this show sucks.
Right, exactly. And what do? You stop and you go to something else, and it's free because you have your Netflix subscription. Right. So there's very low stakes. That's the problem with a book. It's like a big thing. First of all, if you buy a book, if you have access to it, they're expensive. And so it's a big decision and then you don't like it, you don't want to read it. That's a problem. So Netflix, music, Spotify, whatever your music, you listen, exactly what you're saying. You listen to something, you don't like it, you go to something else. We need to create that same comfort, that same facility with reading.
Okay. Yeah. It makes sense.
Yeah.
That's not something I've ever thought about out loud, I guess. So Educator, if you take one thing from today's conversation, make sure that you consider. I just think about so much, like, again, how I was brought up. Like, I still struggle. Like, if I have a plate of food, I still struggle with not finishing it. I'm full, but I was raised, no, clean plate club, finish your food. So it's like I was brought up in an era where it's like you have to finish everything.
Me too. I always said, like, okay, I would send the food to the kids, or don't give me so much in the first place. I don't know. No, but it's not. Yeah, I mean, reading is hard. We have to think about it differently. Otherwise, we're just going to keep failing. And I don't know if you're going to ask me this question, but I want to answer it. So I'll jump in on myself. But, we have to be realistic about what caregivers and families can do to support their kids' literacy. I mean, we sit in these conference rooms and we create parent materials, going on nature walks I've never in my entire life gone on a nature walk about literacy. Like, what does that mean? Now, sometimes they have these new story walks for little kids, which is great. But, parent materials, and I'm looking at them really carefully. They're very complicated. There's a lot of text. If you're a family who isn't, comfortable with literacy yourself, maybe it's not, English isn't your first language, or potentially you're not even literate in your own language. You may have a confusing feeling about teachers in schools because of your own experience. We hear this a lot. Again, we have to be respectful of these families and what they're expecting them to be able to do. And if you're giving a book and you're saying, read with your child, and, that's not comfortable, that's not going to work. And it's going to make everyone feel bad. And I think, I have a lot of psychology people in my family, and you can see the psychology of how a kid would sort of shun that if it's going to make the parents or family members feel bad. So I think we have to be hyper respectful of what caregivers can actually contribute to literacy and create books that they can read, that they feel comfortable, or pictures, they can fake it, that they're not going to feel awful about it. And I'm on a crusade for that, because I'm looking at these parent materials and it's like not let alone time and all that stuff. But if we can make the child and the caregiver sit down together, it's got to be a happy, positive experience, not something drudgery and scary.